Falls Valley, Ohio, 1897. They had laughed over whiskeys that evening, marveling at the sweetness hidden behind the pale white wrappers that held their newest delight. Eiler Horace Confectionery was now a growing concern in its small production house in the wooded outskirts of a burgeoning Ohio township. The candy recipe had proven out, sumptuous and sunk with cherry. Even made to scale, it worked. Soon they'd be sold in candy shops and general stores throughout the state, beyond even. This was not the only news of note at the celebratory dinner. Marian put her hand on Frances's own, warmly observing the quiet that followed the not unexpected news of their engagement. Somewhere in the darkness of his business partner James Horace's eye, Frances had seen a squint, a blink, something unsettled, displeased, once the words passed his lips, but it was hardly enough to disturb the party to speak of. Perhaps if he had said more, fewer would have died. Or more. Instead, the servants carried away the empty glasses. The investors and their wives departed, pleased by the drawings of the new apparatus that would quicken the candy-making and increase their profits. James had lingered in the threshold of the door, as their carriages rumbled out of view, cigar in hand. When Frances and Marian took their own leave to take the airs with a quiet evening constitutional, he did not hear his footsteps behind them. He did not have a momentary sensation of being followed. No tremor shivered, however, idly up his spine. Frances was in love, a success, making a home and business here in quiet, sturdy Falls Valley, well away from the rush and bother of life in Boston. He did not think of this now. Some time later, there was a muffled noise. The feeling of 100 thin, gauzy, imagined sheets draped over and pulled away from Frances Eiler, inch by inch, one by one, till the darkness became thick and blue, and then semi-transparent. The hem of each dragged delicately across his skin, over his face and neck and torso, down to his toes. And then the feeling began again, light filtering through with more intensity, until he opened his eyes and saw the barn ceiling overhead. It was the earliest degree of morning, and starlings settled and resettled in the hayloft, bringing a steady rain of dust and pieces of hay down on his prone body. Gingerly, Francis touched his body through his red-smeared and sliced-open waistcoat, and he could still feel the wound, the gaping rictus that made a mouth out of his midsection, not sewn shut at all, but neither bleeding, as if some field held the blood inside of him rather than allowing it to spill outright. Next to him was the knife that James had used to cut him open, sticky on his crimson edge. He remembered the pain running through him as sharp and bright as a bolt of lightning, knocking him backward until he was on his back, looking down to see the red spurting out of him like strawberry extract. Then, in his mind, he had known he was leaving himself, rising upward and forward, moving through curtain after curtain, veil after veil, of the blue material that made the air. Then he could not recall, or perhaps understand, where he was exactly, but it did not feel like any description of any heaven he had known, nor any hell. His thinking pushed through one last slip of cornflour. As his recollection left him, and he fell back inside himself, the noises of the animals in their stalls he expected to hear were absent, or they'd gone dumb in the preceding hours. Even the starlings fluttered overhead, without sound. With neither thought nor strength, Francis pulled himself up on his elbows and looked past the garish mess at his middle and surveyed the space around him. In the barn's far corner, on her knees, her limbs as bloodied as the day she had been born, a being, a woman, sat waiting. Marian? No. Her green eyes were both cloudy and filled with an amber light, though one of them was bloodshot and twitched erratically until it was momentarily blinked still. Her blonde hair was long and loose and wild, but she wore a dress fit for any society lady. Even through the vermilion stain he could see the embroidered flowers. She looked not unlike Marian, perhaps a doll made up after her, the detail left to clumsy hands. Like it was struggling to conceive of a language both could understand, the body, the gray-white face of the figure, slid idly to the left. Sigh. The accent seemed fragile, like it would break into barking if pushed too hard. The sick eye was the one that saw him first. When he blinked back, focused, the creature was smiling. He's power of a basilisk. He's power of a basilisk. Had he the strength to pull himself further upright, he would have crossed himself. Blessed Mary, was all he could croak out. What is this? It is life. No more. No less. He blinked again, and the creature blinked back at him, her pupils widening further than they ought. No, no. What are you? Obvious quaver in his voice. She did not rise to tower over him, but instead crawled towards him, scraping herself and her elegant dress through the hay, the dirt, the animal leavings. Commanded Namak O Leman. For strong a hold had the woman, and did the wanderer take up her residence at night when we the darkness is as the grod and crime and supernatural communinuminok, the devilish departing lie. Would I have plunged into skepticism? He did not see her lips move, but felt the words run through him, half understood, half in a tongue that frightened him. The memories of the events of last night returned, cut through the haze like a fresh revelation. James murdered Marian. He murdered me, the bastard. He killed us. He killed us. And now you live. The spoken voice was as steady as her thought felt like a child's verse. She held out her hands to him as if explaining her work, as if he could not see her décolletage through what was surely his blood. I don't need to live. It's her. Marian deserves this unholy resurrection, this life I never asked to have back. A reply. He took her body from this place. But, her spirit has fled. Even if I were to have the will to revive her, it could not be. And then it drew itself up closer to him than he could bear. What are you? A spirit? A devil? You are no creature of the Lord. This is unholy. 'Tis true. I am no claimed woman no more. No. Yes. A creature, but not of any lord. Now even hell has turned me away. I'm the ashes of a believer scattered at hell's gates. Deliberate motions, it picked up the knife, and crawled on top of his still frame and beamed a grin of jagged yellow teeth down at him. Francis couldn't help himself from gasping at that eye, bloodied and twitching in its socket. Though the being straddled his left leg, it felt as though it was weightless, ephemeral. The surface of its cadaverous skin seemed to be swirling constantly. He was grappled by the shape of a woman made of dust, blown both in and out at once, as she moved eerily above him. Bindless the bound, the bindless nib themselves. If you do not want this life, I will take it back. The grin gave way abruptly to a blankness. The stoicism settled on her unpleasant features. With quick, artless moves, she raised the knife and pressed it against his throat. He could feel it nip into his flesh. Numb though he was, he could feel it. He pulled a hand up toward her pale, red-spattered throat, but there was nothing to grip. Francis's work-hardened hands moved right through the body as if it were vapor. He had never seen a spectre before, and put no youthful stock in superstitions, but there was no disbelieving whether she was capable of ending him, if she was of a mind. He quickly sputtered, "Wait, wait, you wretch, you demon! What is it you want from me?" It leaned back, considered for a time, and while she did, straddled by this half-pirate queen, half-penitent wight, Francis tasted the dark cordial of his own vital essence bitter in his throat. He felt the novelty of his own heartbeat, and tended to calming it before it beat itself out of fear in his chest. "I saved you for a purpose, for an end. In you." She ran her filthy, crimson-crested finger over the path James had taken with the knife. He could feel it rub and catch against the incision. "There is a door I would go through, and once I pass, you will have your vengeance against the man who took your lover, against the thing who has made us both." He willed himself to stare into her awful eyes, even the well one turning a bright, almost absinthe green. "What choice is this? My life for vengeance against James, or you cut my throat? Tell me." Even in thinking it, Francis knew he wanted that vengeance. The madness of this offer in no way obscuring the fury that now adulterated his spirit. But he knew he wanted knowledge first. What was he now? How had this come to be? A memory found him as sharp as the knife. James had advised him once, sometimes you just have to jump. As if she had heard his thoughts in a sing-song voice, she mocked his pleading, before gesturing a bony, elongated finger back at the pool of blood that was left where Marian had fallen, as if everything was explained in this single object lesson. Perhaps it was not wrong. It was not wrong. Death. He spoke the words, even as he felt his Adam's apple catch the edge of her careless knife. "Death," it replied, but quickly added, and clearly preferred, "and justice." The words came from her, but not her lips. He could see them writ in red ink and spinning wildly around the room, like a bobbing ring around the rosy. "Justice, justice, 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 justice," until it felt as loud, as stentorian, as if they were sitting within a ringing church bell, ringing a madness he could not disbelieve, because his voice caught hers, and he said it now too, with all the self that remained to him. It terrified him, but no less did it overtake him. "No, no, no, no!" The sensible nature in Francis Eiler asserted itself one last time, and he pushed her and her writhing, matted skirts off of him. He found the strength and stood up, clutching at his stomach and dizzy from the movement, the loss of so much that was vital, soaked into the dirt and wooden slats below him. As he had once told James, there was no matter under the heavens that was not a matter of negotiation. "If I'm your door, demon—" "I am no demon," she interrupted fiercely, her eyes rolling slightly, eerily upward. "If I'm your door, creature, then I am entitled to some answers before you open me, before God damns us both. What gives you these powers over life and death?" "You are gifted beyond all men, because I give thee life, and I give thee purpose for that life." He reached and yanked the blade she had lowered from her bony fist and put it back at his throat. "No. My life was made forfeit when Marian died. If she cannot be returned, if it cannot be made right, It is of no consequence now if I remain among the living. It is nothing to me. It is you who have raised me, you who burn for what happens now. So you tell me what you are and what I must do to pay back this gift. So confronted, her face contorted into a rage. More words heard, unspoken, unspooling in recited cacophony. Know the answer, why love is upon you, why I bring forth body, why you pay for why your grave is full, why we kill this man, no death, no dying, no death, until the black-eyed devil of Quiliuk pays for the garden of the souls of the girl of the flowers without knowing the blade is his own son's blood. No end. May it take 1,000 years. Then her mind telegraphed a buzzing noise, but no further words. Her breath smelt of spent fireplace, her fingers cold against his flesh, as he pressed her cheek against his and whispered her request, made the request an unbreakable gasp on his soul. Each word carried 100 gruesome images, and each hung on him as if he died again to look at it. Some were pale, aged with strange costume. Some were bright and strange, and they moved almost in his mind's eye, but none were without a creature who wielded this knife. The last was this being, in torment, in terror, in unrelenting pain not of moments, but of ages, at the hands of the demon they now both knew was so. As she pulled her face away, this torment broke. She passed her lips over his in a sulphurous, powdery kiss. Francis looked at his savior, and in her green and troubling eyes, against everything he wanted to believe about himself, he believed her, and the images she had somehow given to his mind. James Horace, his business partner, his best friend, an immortal evil being who claimed to love Marion, but slaughtered them both with a rusty knife. He had killed before, and would, without restraint, kill again. His life, such as it would now be, such as hers had now long been, was sustained only to end his. There was a method, a time, and a place. He could never suspect. He suspected everything, knew everything, but not the horrors of this plan, not the investment, and for now, not its principal agent. And as a moral and upright man as Francis Eiler once fancied himself to be, he would pay every price to see it done, just as she had. In that moment the moral man fled the barn, seeking anchor elsewhere. What remained was incredulous of its own fury, its own unassailable rage, but it did not run. This is the vengeance you ask? His mind saw it again, one of the images glowing with light, the water, the faces, all of them in a circle, watching as the blonde woman unmade the beast before them. A peace that would be obtained by no other way than this. A toothsome grin and a nod were her answer. Then I will be your instrument. He felt his voice vibrate in a shout, but he didn't hear the 3 cracks. 1. The solid fist against his jutted chin. 2. The stun of skull against the post behind him. 3. His spine against the floor. He crumpled back to his knees on the wooden slats and filth of the barn floor. A further jolt, and his head was forced against the floor as if there were a heavy boot against his neck, his fingers clutching at air, folding up into themselves, a botulism running through his system, contracting every muscle, a binding in every sense of the word. As his head swam in pain, her voice came to him as though it filled the barn, blew through the rafters. That acrid smell of a fireplace returned, only stronger, much stronger. Smoke began billowing at the floor around him, like a herald's trumpet. The words were clarion, holy, corrupted. This is the first of our meetings. I shall guide you through the darkness. I shall guide you through the fire. I shall guide you to his destruction. Until that day, you may not return to this place. He lay on the floor, convulsing violently, unable to say or think a word in reply, scraping his face into the dirt and splintering as a scalding heat licked towards him. Light from a fire no living thing had set began to chew at the straw strewn on the ground, reaching for posts to char. He blinked, tried to control his own body to move, to protect himself, and in a sudden realization he knew that though he felt the heat, he did not burn, he did not choke. The pressure forcing him down was gone. Another look, and the wound on his stomach was gone too. The scar remained, wide and aggressive. Her smile, James's crooked smile, his own, all carved into him, but neatly mended. He rose to his feet and darted toward the flame-wreathed open door and into the cool air of the woods. For the first time in this, his first, or now, his second life, Francis Eiler knew what had to be done.